Stop acting like this is about you. I'm the one who's dying. My brother snapped after Dad rewrote his will for him. I called the cancer center he claimed was treating him, and everything collapsed in 9 minutes. What would you do if your own sibling faked a terminal illness, just to make sure your dying parents' money went to them? My name is Briar Langford, and I need to tell you what my brother did to our family. My brother Weston has been the fragile one for as long as I can remember. Not physically. He's 6'1", broad shoulders, played varsity lacrosse in high school. But somehow, in our family story, Weston was always the one who needed protecting. It started early. Elementary school headaches that kept him home for days. Stomach bugs that appeared right before exams. A mysterious back pain that flared up every time there was a family obligation he didn't want to attend. Our mother, Corinne, would fuss over him like he was made of glass. Our father, Alden, would quietly rearrange his schedule to drive Weston to doctors who never found anything wrong. And me? I was the other one. The healthy one. The one who showed up, did well in school, didn't cause problems. I was fine, so nobody worried about me. That was the deal, even if nobody ever said it out loud. Weston got the attention because Weston always had something wrong. Briar was fine. Briar could handle it. I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm saying it because you need to understand the pattern. Because patterns are how people like Weston operate. They spend years training you to believe a story about them, so that when they need you to believe the biggest lie of all, you don't even think to question it. My father, Alden Langford, was a civil engineer. Designed bridges, highways, municipal infrastructure. Not glamorous, but he was brilliant at it. 40 years of work, smart investments, a house that was paid off, and a retirement account that made our family comfortable. Not wealthy, but comfortable in a way that meant nobody would ever struggle. He was also the most decent man I've ever known. The kind of father who drove 2 hours to watch my college debate tournaments. Who left notes in my lunchbox until I was embarrassed enough to ask him to stop, and then found them tucked into my textbooks instead. He loved Weston and me equally. I believe that completely. But Corinne's anxiety about Weston created an orbit that pulled everything toward him, and Dad got caught in that gravity like the rest of us. When I was 26, Dad was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, the kind of diagnosis that comes with a timeline and no good options. The doctor laid it out for us. Progressive, terminal, 2 to 5 years depending on how things went. I remember sitting in that office holding my mother's hand while she cried. Weston sat in the corner with his head down, not saying anything. Dad was the calmest person in the room. He looked at us and said, "Well, we've got some planning to do." That was Alden Langford, staring at the end of his life and thinking about how to make sure his family was taken care of. Dad's decline was slow at first. The first year, you almost couldn't tell. A little weakness in his hands. A slight drag in his left foot. He kept working as long as he could. He set up his estate, clear, organized, methodical. Everything split equally between Weston and me. The house would go to Mom with the understanding that it would be sold eventually and the proceeds divided between us. Clean. Fair. Exactly how Dad did everything. Then, 8 months after Dad's diagnosis, Weston dropped his bomb. We were at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. Dad was in his chair. He'd started using a wheelchair part-time by then. Mom was in the kitchen. I was setting the table. Weston walked in with Delaney Shaw, his girlfriend of about a year, and he looked different. Thinner. Pale. Shadows under his eyes that I didn't remember being there last week. He sat down at the table and said, "I need to tell you guys something." Everyone stopped. Dad looked at him. Mom came to the doorway, dish towel in her hands. "I've been having some health issues. I didn't want to say anything until I knew for sure, but I got the results back yesterday." He paused, swallowed hard. His voice cracked perfectly. Not too much, just enough. "It's lymphoma. Stage 3. The room went silent. Not the normal kind of silent. The kind where the air leaves and doesn't come back. Mom made a sound. Not a word, not a cry, just a sound that came from somewhere deep and primal. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around Weston so tight I thought she'd break him. She was already watching her husband die. And now her son. Dad closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. He reached across the table and took Weston's hand. Didn't say anything. Just held it. And I watched something happen to my father in that moment. The ALS was taking his body, but this news took something deeper. Something behind his eyes dimmed. Like a man who had made peace with his own death, but couldn't make peace with his child's. Delaney was crying quietly beside Weston, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she'd conveniently had ready in her purse. She rubbed Weston's back in slow circles, put her head on his shoulder. The image of devotion. I stood by the table with plates in my hands and felt the ground shift beneath me. My brother. My annoying, dramatic, always sick with something brother. Cancer. Real cancer. Stage 3. I put the plates down. I walked around the table, and I hugged him. Tight. Because whatever our history, whatever the sibling stuff, he was my brother, and he was dying, and none of the rest of it mattered. We're going to fight this, I told him. You hear me? We're going to fight this together. He nodded into my shoulder. I felt him shaking. I thought it was fear. Now I know it was probably the effort of keeping a straight face. At least, that's what I believed. Over the next few months, Weston's illness became the center of everything. And I mean everything. Mom, who was already stretched thin caring for Dad, now split her time between 2 sick family members. I stepped in wherever I could, cooking meals, driving Dad to his appointments, managing his medications. Weston's treatment schedule was aggressive, he said. Chemo every 2 weeks. He'd come to family dinners looking exhausted, sometimes wearing a beanie to cover his thinning hair. He lost weight steadily, maybe 30 pounds over 4 months. Delaney was always by his side, managing his appointment calendar, bringing him smoothies, posting updates on social media about his fight. I didn't question any of it. Why would I? My brother told me he had cancer. My mother was devastated. My father, already dying, was carrying the additional grief of thinking he might outlive his own son. That was the cruelest part, looking back. Dad's biggest fear wasn't his own death. It was Weston's. He told me one evening, when it was just the 2 of us. Mom was asleep. Weston had gone home. Briar, promise me something. Anything, Dad. If I go first, take care of your brother. Whatever he needs. Promise me. I promise. His hand squeezed mine. Weak, but deliberate. You've always been the strong one, sweetheart. I'm sorry that's been unfair to you. It hasn't been unfair. Yes, it has. And I see it. I've always seen it. That conversation is burned into me. Every word. Because my father, in his last months on this earth, was apologizing to me for a dynamic that wasn't his fault, while carrying grief for a son who wasn't actually sick. It was around this time that Dad decided to change his will. He called his lawyer, made adjustments. The new will gave 70% to Weston and 30% to me. The reasoning was clear. Weston's medical bills were mounting, his ability to work long-term was uncertain, and if the worst happened, Delaney would need support. Dad told me about the change directly, sat me down in his room, looked me in the eye. I need to adjust things, Briar. Your brother's treatment is expensive, and if something happens, Dad, you don't have to explain. I want to. Because this isn't about loving one of you more. You know that, right? I know that. You're going to be fine. You've always been fine. But Weston needs it more. I understand. It's okay. And I meant it. Every word. I would have given my entire share if it meant my brother had a chance to survive. That's what family does. You don't calculate fairness when someone you love is dying. Except he wasn't dying. And I handed over my father's legacy based on a lie. Dad passed on a Tuesday morning in April. Peaceful. In his bed, at home, with Mom and me beside him. Weston was at a treatment session and arrived 20 minutes late. He walked in, saw Dad's still face, and collapsed beside the bed. Crying. Shaking. Holding Dad's hand and saying, I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. Mom held Weston. Comforted him. Her dying son, missing his father's final moments. Could there be anything more tragic? I stood in the doorway watching. My father was gone. My brother was performing. And I didn't know yet which of those 2 things would hurt more. The funeral was 4 days later. Beautiful service. Dad's colleagues spoke about his integrity. His old college friends drove in from 3 states. The church was full, standing room only. Alden Langford was the kind of man that people showed up for. Weston gave a eulogy that made the entire room weep. He stood at the podium, thin, pale, the picture of a brave young man fighting his own battle while mourning his father, and spoke about Dad's strength. His sacrifice. How Dad, worried about everyone else even when his own time was running out. My father spent his final months worried about me, Weston said, his voice breaking at exactly the right moment. And I need everyone in this room to know. That's the kind of man he was. He was dying, and he was thinking about his son. The room sobbed. Mom buried her face in tissues. I stood next to the podium and thought, my brother is brave, dying himself and still standing here honoring our father. God, I was so blind. Delaney stood in the back of the church, tissues in hand, the picture of a supportive partner watching her boyfriend grieve while battling his own illness. After the service, she posted on Instagram a black and white photo of flowers with the caption, "Lost an angel today. Heaven gained the best father-in-law I could have asked for." 342 likes. 87 comments. All from people who had no idea they were engaging with a fiction. Performance. All of it. Every tear, every word, every carefully curated social media post. A two-person show performed at a dead man's funeral. 3 months after Dad's funeral, something happened. Something small that I almost missed. Weston started looking better. Not dramatically, but noticeably. More color in his face. A little weight back on. More energy at family dinners. New treatments working, he told Mom, who wept with relief. Doctors are really optimistic. I was happy. Genuinely, stupidly happy. My father was gone, but at least my brother was going to make it. At least the money Dad redirected toward Weston's care was serving its purpose. At least something good was happening. Then Milo Hart called me. Milo has been my best friend since college. Journalism major. Works at a local news outlet. Has a brain that never stops connecting dots, even when nobody asked him to. Briar, this is going to sound weird, but I was at that new gym on Ridgemont, the CrossFit place, and I swear I saw Weston. Okay. Doing deadlifts. Heavy ones. Like, really heavy. He's been feeling better. New treatment, Briar. He was pulling 315. That's not feeling better from chemo. That's a healthy person who's been training for months. I laughed it off. Told Milo he probably saw someone who looked like Weston. Weston had cancer. Stage 3 lymphoma. You don't do deadlifts during chemo. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Milo's face on that call. Milo doesn't exaggerate. Milo doesn't make mistakes like that. And 315 deadlifts. I pushed it down. Filed it away. Told myself it was nothing. 2 weeks later, I was at my parents' house helping Mom sort through Dad's papers. Bills, insurance documents, tax records, the administrative aftermath of losing someone. I was going through a stack of medical correspondence when something caught my eye. A folder labeled Weston Medical. Inside were printouts of bills and insurance claims. But as I went through them, something didn't add up. There were charges for regular doctor visits, checkups, blood work, normal stuff. But there was nothing from an oncologist. Nothing from a cancer treatment center. No chemo bills. No radiation invoices. No hospital stays. For a man supposedly undergoing aggressive chemotherapy every 2 weeks for over a year, there should have been hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical billing. There was nothing. I sat on the floor of my dead father's office and felt something cold and horrible start to form in my chest. I called Weston's hospital, the one he said he'd been treated at. I'm calling about a patient, Weston Langford. He's been receiving chemotherapy treatment at your facility. One moment, please. Typing. Pause. Ma'am, we don't have a patient by that name in our oncology department. Could you check again? LENGFORD. I've checked twice. There's no record of a Weston Langford receiving any treatment here. I hung up. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I expected them to shake. But they were perfectly still, like the rest of me had gone somewhere far away, and only my body was left, sitting on the floor, processing something that couldn't be true, but obviously was. I called the oncologist Weston had mentioned by name. Dr. Pradeep Mahajan. The number Weston had given Mom went to a voicemail with a generic greeting. I looked up Dr. Pradeep Mahajan in the state medical directory. He didn't exist. Not in Virginia. Not in any neighboring state. I called the pharmacy where Weston said he picked up his prescriptions. No record. No prescriptions. Nothing. Each call took about 3 minutes. In 9 minutes, my brother's entire illness evaporated. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on that floor for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough for the light in the room to change. Then I called Milo. You were right, I said. About the gym. About all of it. Briar, what are you saying? Weston doesn't have cancer. He never had cancer. There are no medical records. No hospital stays. No oncologist. No prescriptions. Nothing. Silence on the other end. I could hear Milo breathing. Processing. Are you sure? Maybe the records are under a different. I checked everything, Milo. 3 hospitals. 2 pharmacies. The state medical directory. His oncologist doesn't exist. The man my brother has been seeing for treatment is a name attached to a voicemail with no actual person behind it. Jesus Christ. My father changed his will because of this. He gave Weston 70% of everything. My father spent his last months alive, the last months he had on this earth, grieving for a son who was playing a role. He died believing Weston was dying too. And Weston sat at his bedside and let him believe it. Milo didn't say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, steady, the voice of someone who knows the next words matter. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure he answers for every single day of it. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. Your investigation skills. Your archives. Your attention to detail. I need a case so airtight that no lawyer on earth can poke a hole in it. I'm in. When do we start? We already started. I didn't confront Weston yet. I needed more. I needed everything airtight before I said a single word. Because Weston was charming. Weston was convincing. Weston had spent his entire life talking his way out of corners. If I came at him with anything less than overwhelming, undeniable proof, he'd find a crack and slip through it. Milo helped. His journalist brain kicked in, and we spent 3 weeks building a file. Systematic. Methodical. Every detail documented. Every date cross-referenced. Every lie cataloged. The missing hospital records. The non-existent doctor. The empty pharmacy history. I pulled Weston's social media, Delaney's too. Cross-referenced dates when he claimed to be in treatment, with check-ins, photos, and location tags. On 4 separate occasions when Weston was supposedly at chemo, Delaney had tagged them at restaurants, a hotel in Virginia Beach, and a furniture store. She'd deleted the posts later, but Milo had archived them. Then I found the forged documents. The diagnosis letter Weston had shown our parents. I took it to an actual oncologist, a friend of Milo's, who looked at it for 30 seconds and said, "This isn't from any hospital I've ever seen. The formatting is wrong, the staging classification is outdated, and the doctor's name doesn't correspond to any licensed oncologist in this region." 30 seconds. That's how long it took a real doctor to identify what my family believed for 2 years. The last piece came from Delaney herself. I invited her for coffee, just us girls. Casual, friendly, and halfway through the conversation, I mentioned a trip Weston was planning. "Oh, that'll be nice," Delaney said. "We haven't gone anywhere since Virginia Beach." Virginia Beach? When was that? Like, August? Last summer. Last August. When Weston told us he was doing an intensive 3-day treatment cycle and couldn't leave the house. Delaney realized her mistake about 2 seconds after she said it. I watched the color drain from her face in real time. I mean, that was before. It was a quick trip. He was feeling. "It's fine, Delaney. Don't worry about it." She worried about it. I could tell by the way she couldn't make eye contact for the rest of the coffee. Good. Let her worry. I hired a lawyer. Estate litigation with experience in fraud cases. Her name was Catherine Webb. I sat in her office and laid everything out. The fake diagnosis. The missing records. The forged documents. The will change. The money. Catherine listened without interrupting. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair. "How much are we talking about in terms of the estate?" My father's estate was worth approximately $1.2 million. Under the original will, it would have been split equally. Under the changed will, Weston received 70%. That's roughly $840,000 obtained through fraudulent representation. And your mother? My mother doesn't know yet. She still thinks Weston had cancer and recovered. That's going to be the hardest part. I know. Catherine took the case. We filed a civil suit to contest the will on grounds of fraud and undue influence. Separately, she referred the forged medical documents to the district attorney. Forging medical records is a felony. Using them to manipulate an estate is fraud. I told Mom before the court date. I had to. She was going to find out anyway, and she deserved to hear it from me. Not from a lawyer. Not from a news report. From her daughter, sitting across from her, telling her the truth that everyone else had been too busy lying to share. I drove to her house on a Saturday morning. She was in the garden. Dad's garden. Technically, the one he designed with careful rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs back when his hands still worked. She'd been maintaining it since he died. Weeding it, watering it, talking to it, sometimes, when she thought nobody could hear. I think it was the closest she could get to talking to him. I sat her down at the kitchen table. Made tea first. Not because I was stalling, Because some conversations need something warm to hold on to. Mom, I need to tell you something about Weston, and it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever heard. She looked at me. Steady. Patient. The same look she gave me when I was 8 and fell off my bike. The look that says, tell me where it hurts. I told her everything. She didn't react the way I expected. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just sat very still, very quiet, and looked at me with eyes that were processing something too large to process all at once. Like watching someone try to fit an ocean into a glass. Show me, she said. I showed her. The missing records. The fake doctor. The forged diagnosis. The pharmacy with no prescriptions. Delaney's archived social media posts. The CrossFit gym. Everything. When it was done, my mother stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the garden for a long time. Dad's tomatoes were coming in, red and heavy on the vine. He would have been proud of them. Your father changed his will because he thought Weston was dying, she said. Not a question. Yes. Your father spent his last months on Earth, grieving for a son who was perfectly healthy. Yes. And Weston sat beside him, held his hand, accepted his tears, took his money, and never once, not once, told him the truth. Yes. She turned from the window. Her face was something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness. Something past both of those things. Something that had gone through every emotion and come out the other side into a place that was very quiet and very final. Like a door closing that would never open again. Your father's last words to me were about Weston, she said. He said, take care of our boy. He's going to need you when I'm gone. Those were his last words. And they were about a lie. I had nothing to say to that. There is nothing to say to that. Do what you have to do, Briar. Are you sure? Do what you have to do. The court case was efficient. Catherine was surgical. The evidence was overwhelming, and Weston's lawyer knew it. The forged medical documents were presented first. Catherine put them on a screen next to a real diagnosis letter from the same hospital. Formatting different, letterhead different, classification system outdated. Side by side, the forgery was embarrassingly obvious. The kind of thing that only works on people who trust you too much to look closely. Next came the missing hospital records. A representative from the hospital testified that no patient named Weston Langford had ever been treated in their oncology department. No admissions. No outpatient visits. No billing records. Nothing. The non-existent oncologist. Catherine showed the state medical board's database on screen. No Dr. Pradeep Mahajan licensed to practice in Virginia or any surrounding state. The phone number Weston had given our family connected to a prepaid cell phone, purchased with cash, registered to a fake name. The pharmacy confirmed 0 prescriptions. Delaney's archived social media posts were displayed, date-stamped photos at restaurants and hotels on days Weston claimed to be receiving chemotherapy. Milo testified. Calm, factual, precise. Described seeing Weston at the gym, deadlifting 315 pounds. During a week when Weston told our family he was too weak to leave the house. Weston sat in the courtroom in a suit and tried to look composed. His jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table. Delaney sat behind him, staring at her lap, trying to become invisible. Neither of them looked at me. Not once. Weston's lawyer attempted a defense. Claimed Weston had been seeking alternative treatment that wouldn't appear in traditional medical records. Catherine dismantled it in under a minute. Alternative treatment requires an alternative practitioner. Where are they? What's their name? Where are their records? No answer. Because there was no answer. The judge invalidated the changed will. Restored Dad's original 50-50 split. Ordered Weston to return the excess funds, approximately $420,000, and referred the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Fraud. Forgery. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Wire fraud for the GoFundMe. When the ruling was read, I watched Weston's face. I was looking for something, remorse, shame, guilt, anything that told me my brother was still human somewhere under the performance. There was nothing, just the flat, empty expression of a man who got caught. Outside the courthouse, Weston tried to talk to me. Briar, please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I was desperate. I had debts. I was drowning. I didn't know what else. You let Dad die thinking you were dying too. You took his last months of peace and filled them with grief for something that wasn't real. There is no explanation for that. He opened his mouth, closed it, For the first time in his life, Weston Langford had nothing to say. I walked past him, got in my car, drove away. Weston was charged. The criminal case moved slowly, but it moved. Forgery. Fraud. The GoFundMe he'd set up, $23,000 from strangers who believed a dying man needed help. That was wire fraud. Federal. The kind of charge that doesn't go away with a good lawyer and a sad story. Delaney was charged as an accessory. And here's the thing about loyalty built on a lie. It collapses the moment the lie stops being profitable. Delaney's lawyer contacted the prosecution within 72 hours of her being charged. She wanted a deal. She would testify against Weston, provide text messages, emails, details of how the scheme was planned and executed. She'd tell them everything. Milo told me about it over the phone. Delaney flipped. Full cooperation. She's giving them everything. How noble of her, I said. She's claiming Weston pressured her into it. That she was afraid of him. She wasn't afraid at Virginia Beach. She wasn't afraid posting supportive girlfriend content on Instagram. She wasn't afraid sitting next to him at our dinner table watching my father cry. I know. She was in on it from day one. She was a partner, not a victim. And now she's pretending to be a victim because that's the only role left that might keep her out of prison. You're probably right. I'm definitely right. Delaney's testimony filled in the gaps. Weston had planned the scheme for months before announcing his diagnosis. He'd researched symptoms online, practiced looking sick, deliberately lost weight through extreme dieting. The shaved head wasn't from chemo. He'd done it in Delaney's bathroom with a razor and a YouTube tutorial. The forged documents came from a disbarred medical technician Weston had found through a friend of a friend, paid him $4,000 for a complete fake diagnosis package. For $1,000. That's what it cost to forge the documents that stole $840,000. That's a return on investment that would make Wall Street jealous. Mom hasn't spoken to Weston since the trial. She didn't make a dramatic declaration. She just stopped calling, stopped answering, changed her locks. Quiet. Absolute. Final. The same woman who spent 30 years fussing over her fragile son closed that door without a sound. And somehow, that silence was louder than anything she could have said. Last month, I was at Dad's house, Mom's house now, helping her reorganize the study. I found a box in the back of a closet. Dad's handwriting on the lid. For the kids. Inside were 2 envelopes. One labeled Briar. One labeled Weston. I opened mine. Briar, I know you think I don't see you. I do. I've always seen you. You are the most quietly strong person I have ever known. You don't ask for attention. You don't ask for help. You just show up and hold everything together. I need you to know that I see that. And I need you to know that it matters. More than you'll ever understand. Dad, I read it once. Folded it. Put it back in the envelope. I picked up Weston's envelope. Held it for a long time. Then I put it back in the box, unopened. It's not mine to open. And honestly, I don't care what it says. I closed the box. Put it back in the closet. Walked out of the room. Mom was in the kitchen making tea. She looked at me. Find anything interesting? No, I said. Nothing important. I sat at the table. Drank my tea. Watched the garden through the window. Dad's garden. Still growing. Still green. Still there. And I felt nothing. Not sadness. Not anger. Not relief. Just done. Some people deserve your grief. Some people deserve your anger. And some people don't deserve anything from you at all. Not even the energy it takes to feel something about them. Weston is that person now. A closed file. A sealed envelope. A name I'll stop saying eventually. And my father, the man who saw me when nobody else did. His letter sits in a box in a closet, and that's enough. I don't need to read it again. I already know what it says. I've always known. I was the strong one. I am the strong one. And I'm done.